Zacian, hero of many battles. Zacian is a Generation 8 legendary Pokemon that made its debut in the games Pokémon Sword and Shield. In the main series, it also had another form. When given the rusted sword to hold, Zacian will turn into its Crowned Sword Form. In its Crowned Sword Form, it's extremely powerful. So powerful in fact that it was nerfed in the Gen 9 games. Eventually, base form Zacian made its debut in Pokémon GO in August 2021 during the Galar season unlock bonus. But here's the thing, see, Zacian in Pokémon GO is a pretty decent choice for a fairy type, even though it is lacking a very fast move. However, like I mentioned before, it has potential to leave an impact in the meta in the future, since it still has yet to receive its Crowned Sword Form alongside its signature move Behemoth Blade. And it could be a very powerful Pokemon with busted stats. That is what we will be talking about today. How strong will Zacian Crowned Sword be in Pokemon GO? And what you need to know before investing for this potentially powerful legendary doggo. Before I talk about Zacian Crowned Sword Form's future impact in the PvE meta, I'll need to go over some basic understanding in what this Pokemon really is. So to help you get a better understanding on what Zacian Crowned Sword is, Zacian has an alternate form that is activated by giving it its rusted sword in the main series. When it transforms, its appearance changes. The fringes of the fur on its back become wing-like armor, and its braids grow to resemble ribbons. Additionally, its head is covered by a golden helmet, and it carries a golden sword decorated to resemble Zacian's colors. In battle, when it uses its signature move Behemoth Blade, its armor on its back combines with its sword to increase its size and power. It also gains a steel typing as a secondary type, and if it knows Iron Head, it will learn its signature move Behemoth Blade. Lastly, Zacian and Zamazenta played a major part in Pokemon Sword and Shield, as they both together stopped the Darkest Day from Eternatus 3,000 years ago. Additionally, Zacian and Zamazenta also cannot Dynamax. Zacian and Zamazenta were pretty powerful Pokemon in the ancient Galar days, which brings us to our second question. What are Zacian Crowned Sword stats? Zacian Crowned Sword stats in the main series are strong. In Generation 8, its stats were HP 90, Attack 170, Defense 115, Special Attack 80, Special Defense 115, and Speed 148, giving it a total base stats of 720. Arceus levels. However, in Generation 9, its attack was nerfed by 20 points, bringing its total base stats down to 700. In Pokemon GO, Zacian Crowned Sword had an attack stat of 132, a defense stat of 240, and 192 stamina. However, because of its Generation 9 stat nerf, its attack stat was nerfed in Pokemon GO 2, bringing it to 295, which is still very strong and puts it on attack levels like Rampardos and Mewtwo. If it had kept its 332 attack stat, it would have been an even stronger Pokemon. Okay, now that I've given you the full explanation and the game stats, let's talk about how strong Zacian Crowned Sword Form would be in Pokemon GO. First, let's talk about it as a Steel type. Currently, Zacian in its Hero of Many Battles form as a Steel type is okay. It definitely exists. but there are better steel types to use, mainly because it doesn't gain steel type stab. However, when it does gain its steel typing in its Crowned Sword form, we can now have a better look. Now with better stats and a steel typing, it's very strong, having a performance that trails under Shadow/Mega Metagross and Shadow Excadrill. It's still way under Duskmane Necrozma however, but as you can see in the charts, Zacian Crowned Sword with Metal Claw and Iron Head is above Duskmane Necrozma with the same move pool. It's basically just Duskmane Necrozma with better stats, better TPS, better TDO, and a different typing that can give it more advantages than it. So now that we know this is a good thing, it's time to talk about its own signature move. Currently, Duskmane Necrozma dominates the Steel type meta, thanks to how busted its signature move, Sunsteel Strike, is. Zacian Crowned Sword needs its signature move, Behemoth Blade, to stand a chance against Duskmane. Now we don't know how strong Behemoth Blade will be, but since it's a legendary signature move, and due to how generous Niantic is when giving great stats to these moves, we can safely assume that it will be a great move. But how great specifically? Let's say we give it stats similar to Sunsteel Strike, and we give it to Zacian Crowned Sword. Now we can really see a difference here. It tops the Steel type chart. It would easily become the #1 Steel type, and rightfully so. It would basically just be Duskmane Necrozma, but even more busted. Not only this, but it can also be somewhat of a generalist, especially in snowy weather. Note that it would need to have its signature move with these similar stats. Otherwise, if it doesn't, and say we give it with similar parameters to Doom Desire or Meteor Mash instead, which are still really strong Steel type charge moves, it falls behind Duskmane Necrozma slightly. That just shows how busted Sunsteel Strike is, and what Behemoth Blade could also become if Niantic plays its cards right. Now that we know that Zacian Crowned Sword will be a potent Steel type, let's have a look and see its other typing and how good it would be in that role. So currently in its Hero of Many Battles form, Zacian is actually a really solid Fairy type, thanks to its bulk and Fire Fang's parameters, all even without a fast Fairy move. So what about its Crowned Sword form? It becomes a top Fairy type, even surpassing Mega Gardevoir, without a Fairy move. This is incredible. However, it runs into a few problems in this typing. Firstly, Fairy is still a very lackluster typing, as there's so many better options. So against Dark types, Fighting types are better. And against Dragon types, Dragons are better. Zacian Crowned Sword is a defensive wall against Dragon types, and its double Fairy/Steel typing gives it a 4 times resistance to Dragon types, allowing it to survive on the field for a very long time, but it would still be nowhere near as powerful as stuff like Mega Rayquaza or Black and White Kyurem. And also, since it lacks a very fast move, it will still trail behind Mega Gardevoir because it's doing fast neutral damage, and Mega Gardevoir is doing damage on both fronts. However, Zacian Crowned Sword does have one more trick up its sleeve for Fairy type DPS. In the main series, starting from Generation 9, Zacian can learn another Fairy move by the name of Misty Terrain. If you don't know, Misty Terrain in the main series creates a terrain on the field for 5 turns and protects the Pokémon from status conditions. However, it deals 0 damage, So why am I talking about a fairy move that doesn't do damage? Well, that's because Niantic could release it soon as a good very fast move. And even if it's just a decent fairy move or has similar parameters to Charm, it would easily allow Zacian Crowned Sword to surpass Mega Gardevoir in DPS. It has better bulk and does more fairy damage. It's not a Mega however, so it wouldn't be able to spread Mega Boosts around. But combined with Mega Gardevoir's Mega Boosts and Cloudy Weather, that could potentially bring fairy types to new heights. So all in all, Zacian Crowned Sword will be an absolute beast of a Pokemon. But it does have a few downsides. In the main series, if Zacian holds the Rusted Sword and if it is learning Iron Head, it will turn into Behemoth Blade when it transforms. If kept like this from the main series and translated to Pokémon GO, that means unlike Duskmane Necrozma, Zacian Crowned Sword cannot throw out a parting shot before it faints. So at times, its DPS race compared to Duskmane Necrozma wouldn't be much of a difference. Aside this, I don't see any other future Steel type that can rival Zacian Crowned Swords. As a Fairy type, it wouldn't have the highest possible DPS because it would face competition from one Fairy Mega. That is, Mega Diancie. Currently, Mega Diancie is pretty weak as a Fairy type since it lacks a fast Fairy move. Moonblast is actually a great Fairy move that it can muster. Assuming Zacian doesn't get access to a fast Fairy move either, it will face competition from Mega Diancie as a Fairy type, thanks to its absurd attack stat. Aside from this scenario, Zacian Crowned Sword will be a very solid Fairy type when needed. Though double weak Fairy bosses are very rare to come by, so it would take some time for Zacian Crowned Sword to deal a huge chunk of damage by simply dusting the battles away. Lastly, Steel typing isn't actually as meta as you may think. There are very little raid bosses that are weak to Steel type, or if they are, they'd also be double weak to something else. Though if one does show up with none of these circumstances, Zacian Crowned Sword will almost always be the #1 priority in leading the charge of many players' teams. So now that we've discovered how strong Zacian Crowned Sword will or could be in the game, we will now talk about how we might be able to obtain it. So, in the main series, Zacian can transform into its Crowned Sword form, giving its Rusted Sword to hold. We might be able to do something similar to that by getting the Rusted Sword from a special field research. When we get it, we can maybe use some Zacian candies and some Stardust to transform Zacian into its Crowned Sword form. And if it currently has Iron Head in its moveset, holding its Rusted Sword, it would transform into Behemoth Blade, just like in the main series. This move could also have a unique effect on Dynamax raids, doing double damage to it at the cost of not being able to Dynamax like in the main series. We could also raid its Crowned Sword form as a raid boss and get some sort of energy after defeating it, just like with Black and White Kyurem? I don't know. And how could it be treated? As a form change? Or a Mega Evolution? My prediction is that it could be treated as a form change, just like Hoopa Unbound. It could cost some Stardust and candy to transform, and it would only be allowed to form change if it's given its Rusted Sword. And we could transform it back whenever we want. Though could we do this for other Zacians as well? Because that would be insane. Though I'd imagine it'd be treated just like how the other form change Pokemon were treated. Final closing points of Zacian Crowned Sword. Overall, It will be an absolute menace in Pokemon GO. Even with its stats being nerfed, it will take the meta down by storm. Obviously not as impactful as stuff like Mega Rayquaza, but it will still join similar levels compared to Black and White Kyurem, Primal Kyogre and Groudon, and Duskmane / Dawn Wings Necrozma as one of the most busted Pokemon in the game. It will become the absolute queen of steel types in Pokemon GO if its signature move is given great parameters. And it will also become a very powerful fairy type. Maybe it would also become a generalist with it being so powerful. Another quick note for this thing is that if it could be used in PvP as well, I'd imagine it would be just as busted as its base form, dealing huge chunks of damage and defeating loads of Master League stables. Though I'm not a huge PvP expert, and mostly just a PvE guy, so if you have a very strong Zacian in your inventory right now, hold on to it no matter what. Zacian Crowned Sword will be in this game before you know it. Zacian right now is a pretty good Pokemon, but it can become even better. And that wraps up my future PvE analysis on Zacian Crowned Sword. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like if you did enjoy it, and subscribe to my channel if you are new, and hit that bell icon to see more content on my channel. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you guys later. Take care of yourselves.